The thing nobody tells you about the so-called peaceful light is how practiced it is. It doesn't rush you. It waits until your guard drops, until your breathing slows, until memory softens into something warm and pliable. Then it speaks in voices you already trust. Not thunder. Not commands. Familiar tones. A grandmother's laugh. A father's cadence. A childhood nickname said exactly the way it used to be said. That's how the wardens work. They don't force. They remind that I used to think near-death stories contradicted each other. One person sees angels, another sees a corridor, someone else hears music. Over time it became obvious those weren't contradictions at all. They were customizations. The system doesn't show you a light. It shows your light. Whatever you associate with safety, belonging, forgiveness, or completion gets rendered and projected. The illusion isn't crude. It's intimate. What changed things for me was noticing what always came after the welcome. There was always a turn. A soft instruction. Go this way. It's time. You're not finished. A suggestion that felt voluntary but wasn't. That's the hook. Once you follow it, the memory dissolves, the edge dulls, and you're back in the cycle with the same fears stitched into you, just arranged differently. The wardens don't need you ignorant. They need you uncertain. Fear feeds them, yes, but confusion feeds them longer. If you're unsure whether to resist, if you hesitate because you don't want to offend a glowing being that looks like love, that hesitation is consent. The system runs on that kind of consent. It always has. People ask me how I know this isn't just imagination layered onto old myths. I usually answer with another question. Why do the stories repeat the same mechanics across cultures that never spoke to each other? Why the same tunnel, the same review, the same instruction to return or continue? When a pattern survives centuries and geography, it's no longer folklore. It's infrastructure. There's a word I don't use lightly: rehearsal. Life, as it's currently structured, is rehearsal for that moment. Every time you abandon your intuition to follow an authority that claims to know better. Every time you override a quiet inner no because the external yes looks safer. Every time you trade your awareness for comfort. The threshold after death isn't the first test. It's the final one. I didn't learn this from a book I can recommend publicly. I learned it from conversations that always happened late, in rooms where phones were turned face down, from people who spoke calmly because panic would have disqualified them. One of them, a woman who never raised her voice, explained it like this: the wardens are not gods. They are managers. Old, clever, exhausted managers maintaining a system that keeps breaking because certain souls keep remembering themselves. She never used grand titles. She called the light the funnel. She called the welcoming figures interfaces. And she said something that stuck with me: if the truth needed fear to survive, it wouldn't be true. Fear is a fuel of convenience, not of necessity. That's where the counter key comes in. Not a weapon. Not a spell. A refusal articulated so cleanly that the system can't misinterpret it. 4 letters. Not shouted. Not begged. Spoken from a state that doesn't argue or justify. Spoken the way you'd state your own name. Calm. Finished. I won't dramatize it. Drama is part of how the funnel disorients you. The 4 letters don't glow. They don't vibrate your chest. They don't summon anything. What they do is simpler and far more disruptive: they end the conversation. When spoken correctly, the interfaces stop negotiating. The images destabilize. The sense of being guided collapses. Not because you fought, but because you declined. This is the part people misunderstand. They think escape requires strength or purity or spiritual rank. It doesn't. It requires clarity. The kind that doesn't rush and doesn't apologize. The kind you practice here, now, every time you choose awareness over reassurance that I'm not asking you to believe me. Belief is another leash. I'm asking you to notice how often comfort asks for your consent before it costs you something you can't get back. Once you see that pattern, the rest stops sounding abstract. That will slow this down. We'll stay practical. No ceremonies. No theatrics. Just mechanics, memory, and a way to remain yourself when everything familiar tries to claim you. The setting doesn't matter as much as people think, but for clarity, picture a quiet city that never quite sleeps. Not a dystopia. Not a paradise. Just streets washed in sodium light, apartments stacked like thought patterns, and people moving through routines they didn't consciously choose. That's where the wardens do their best work, inside normality. In older texts they were called rulers, architects, overseers. I avoid those names now. They give too much credit. Wardens fits better. They don't create life. They regulate flow. They make sure nothing leaves without being processed and returned. Like airport security for consciousness, except the exit signs are intentionally mislabeled. The craftsman warden, again, not a god, more like a chief engineer, doesn't appear as a tyrant. That's a mistake people make when they imagine control. Real control is subtle. It convinces you the rules are natural, inevitable, even comforting. Gravity for the soul. Questioning it feels childish, irresponsible, or dangerous. That's by design. In this city, I met people who had no business agreeing with each other. Different backgrounds. Different politics. Different spiritual languages. And yet, when the conversation drifted late enough, they described the same internal pressure points. The same emotional levers. Shame loops. Guilt narratives. The feeling of being watched, not constantly, but selectively, as if attention snapped on whenever you stepped out of line internally. One man described it perfectly. He said, "It's not that something tells me what to do. It's that something reacts when I don't. That reaction, anxiety spikes, sudden doubt, intrusive memories, that's the feedback system. The wardens don't need to steer you when they can correct you. This is why fear is their currency, but not in the way horror films portray it. They don't want you terrified. Terror wakes people up too fast. They want low-grade, persistent unease. The kind that makes you seek authority. The kind that makes you ask permission for your own instincts. Over time, that becomes identity. Certain souls don't stabilize properly in that environment. They question without trying to rebel. They notice without trying to dominate. They feel a quiet resistance that doesn't harden into anger. These are the ones the system struggles with. Not because they're special, but because they're inconvenient. They don't produce clean emotional output. The pressure increases on them in predictable ways. Life complications stack. Distractions multiply. Spiritual confusion is encouraged. Too many paths, too many voices, too many warnings about being wrong. The goal isn't to stop awakening. It's to drown it in options until it collapses under its own weight. I watched this happen to a woman in our group. Every time she grew calmer, something external flared up. Family drama. Sudden self-doubt. Dreams filled with authority figures telling her she was arrogant for trusting herself. None of it dramatic enough to point at. All of it effective. Until she stopped arguing with it, that was the moment things shifted. The wardens rely on engagement, debate, defense, emotional reaction. When she stopped trying to prove anything, to herself or to the pressure, the interference thinned. Not gone. Just quieter. Like a radio losing signal when you walk out of range, this is the part that unsettles people. The system isn't omnipotent. It's procedural. It follows rules. Those rules are ancient and surprisingly fragile. Consent, even implied consent, is one of them. Withdrawal of consent, when done without fear or theatrics, breaks sequences the wardens can't easily repair. They will try to reframe that withdrawal as isolation, arrogance, or danger. You'll be told that independence equals disconnection. That guidance is necessary. That safety requires oversight. These are managerial arguments, not truths. They sound reasonable because they've been refined for centuries. In the old language, the craftsman warden was said to envy something it couldn't replicate: direct knowing. Not belief. Not faith. Knowing without intermediaries. That's the fracture point. Every ruler beneath it exists to buffer, distort, or delay that knowing until it feels unreachable. But here's the thing: systems built on mediation panic when mediation is refused. They can't force immediacy. They can only offer substitutes. When you stop accepting substitutes, the system doesn't collapse dramatically. It simply stops responding the way it used to. People expect fireworks, revelations, punishment. What actually happens is quieter. You feel less pulled, less corrected, less managed. And because drama has trained us to equate intensity with truth, that quiet gets mistaken for nothing happening. Something is happening. It's just happening on your terms. Remember this when we talk about the 4 letters next. They don't challenge the wardens. They don't accuse them. They don't expose them. They bypass them. That's far more threatening to any system than rebellion. The 4 letters aren't powerful because of their sound. Sound is incidental. They work because of the state they come from. People get this wrong and turn it into a mantra, a chant, a talisman. That misses the point entirely. The letters are a boundary, not a request. And boundaries only function when you mean them without tension. I was told this by someone who refused to call it training. He said training implies hierarchy, and hierarchy is what the wardens understand best. He preferred the word remembering. You don't add anything. You remove the noise that makes you forget how to stand where you already are. The mistake most people make is trying to say the letters against something, against fear, against authority, against death itself. Opposition creates a relationship. Relationships create hooks. The letters are not oppositional. They are declarative. They state position and end the exchange. Think of it like closing a door without slamming it. No anger. No explanation shouted through the wood. Just the quiet click that says the room is no longer available. That's why practice matters, but not in the way meditation apps sell it. You're not trying to reach bliss. You're not trying to empty your mind. You're practicing non-negotiation. The ability to feel something arise, fear, comfort, urgency, and not let it draft your response. The nightly exercise is simple enough that people dismiss it. Sit or lie down. Let the day surface however it does. When a thought or image asks for agreement, notice the request. Don't answer it. When the body relaxes on its own, without being pushed, you're close. That's when you internally state the 4 letters, once, without volume. If you feel like you're waiting for something afterward, you've turned it into a transaction. Stop. Reset. Try again another night. This isn't about perfection. It's about familiarity. The goal is for that state to feel ordinary. Boring, even. Because when the threshold moment comes, whether in dreams, trauma, or death itself, you won't have time to search for the right feeling. You'll default to what you know. People worry about consequences. They ask what happens if they refuse the light. The honest answer is, the system doesn't brief you on exits. It never has. Maps are withheld because certainty dissolves leverage. What I can say is that refusal doesn't lead to darkness. Darkness is another image the wardens use to steer behavior. What comes instead is unmediated presence. No tunnel. No greeters. No script. That can feel disorienting at first because orientation has always been outsourced. We're trained to locate ourselves through feedback, approval, guidance, narrative. Remove that, and there's a moment of groundlessness. Not falling. Just standing without rails. This is where so many people panic and re-enter the funnel voluntarily. Not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught that presence doesn't need commentary. The wardens count on that reflex. They've refined it for a very long time. That I want to be clear about something that often gets distorted. This isn't about escaping life. It's about inhabiting it without intermediaries. When you practice this here, now, your relationships change. Authority loses its hypnotic weight. Fear becomes informational instead of directive. You stop confusing intensity with truth, and yes, the system notices. Not with lightning bolts or curses. With increased attempts at distraction. Sudden busyness. Emotional static. Old doubts resurfacing at odd hours. Treat these as diagnostics, not attacks. They tell you where you used to be reachable. The 4 letters don't protect you. Protection implies danger. They locate you. And when you're located in yourself, very little can move you without permission. If this sounds understated, good. Anything that promises fireworks is probably selling you another interface. The most radical acts in a managed reality are quiet ones done without witnesses. Say the letters when nothing is wrong. That's how you know you're not bargaining. That's how you know the boundary is real. If you stayed with this all the way through, I want you to notice something before you move on. Not what you think about what was said, but how your body feels right now. A little more still? A little less pulled? Or maybe slightly unsettled in a way that isn't fear. That response matters more than agreement. This channel isn't here to replace one belief system with another. Beliefs are portable cages. What we're doing instead is pointing at mechanics you can test privately, without rituals, without allegiance, without needing anyone's approval. Take what resonates. Leave what doesn't. Nothing here requires loyalty. If this perspective helped you see familiar things from a new angle, consider subscribing, not as a commitment, but as a way to keep these conversations available when you want them. If you know someone who's been quietly questioning the same patterns, sharing this video might reach them at the right moment. Without you needing to explain anything, you can support the work simply by liking the video. It helps these ideas surface where curiosity already exists. And if you want to add to the conversation, leave a comment, not to debate, but to reflect what you noticed internally while listening. Those reflections tend to help others more than arguments ever do. Will keep this space calm, grounded, and practical. No fear. No urgency. Just clarity, at your pace.